Nigeria's Minister of Information, Mohammed Idris, says the federal government and the leadership of the Organised Labour have agreed on a 70,000 naira as the minimum wage for Nigerian workers. Now, according to this particular agreement, President Bola Tinubu and the leaders of the Nigerian Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress on Thursday in Abuja did agree this. In their words, "We are happy to announce today, Thursday, that both the Organised Labour and the federal government have agreed on an increase on the 62,000 naira minimum wage. The new national minimum that Mr. President is expected to submit to the National Assembly is now 70,000 naira. An elated Idris told a State House correspondent. Now, joining me to discuss this is Mr. Benson Upah. He's actually the head of information, Nigerian Labour Congress. And of course, he joins virtually from Abuja. I also have on the program Olufemi Lawson is a political analyst, joining in from Lagos, also virtually. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. All right, let me start off with you, Mr. Upah. I mean, this, of course, came as a development just yesterday, after months long back and forth negotiation. However, I would just want you to, briefly take us through the process and how this figure was finally reached.
Well, you have been aware of this process. We started a couple of months ago, and we started with 615,000. We came to 400. We came to 250, and all that while the government was offering 50-something thousand, came to 62,000, and we had a national protest. We met with Mr. President last week. The meeting was inconclusive, and yesterday we met with him again. And then he made an offer of 70,000 plus some other incentives. So the deal was clinched.
Okay. On what parameters was this figure actually attained? 70,000.
70,000 was what Mr. President offered, and it was an improvement on the 62,000. Okay, and Mr. President also said, well, instead of doing this in every 5 years, he agreed that we could do it every 3 years, even as we say, let it be 2 years. Meaning that in the next 2 years or 2.5 years, we could start asking for something else.
All right.
And he also did say, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, no, I want you to land, sir.
Well, he did promise to make available CNG buses and other interventions.
Okay, so he agreed for 70,000 and other interventions. Let me leave you for a moment, Mr. Upah. Let me go to Olufemi Lawson. Please, your immediate reaction to this recent development and how you feel this, would seat, with Nigerian workers.
Well, it is a welcome development, especially when you look at how long this has dragged, for the past few months. There's been this front and back between government and labor. And we must understand that every Nigerian worker deserves a living wage, because though called minimum wage, what's referred to as minimum wage in the past, that 35,000 naira, was not in any way a living wage for workers. Even though 70,000 is still below expectation, but I think it is commendable that there's an improvement from where the government, stood some couple of weeks back, especially when you look at what the state governors and other stakeholders were willing to pay. Now that federal government has agreed to 70,000 naira, I think it is important that we understand that this must have been in consultation with other stakeholders, particularly the governors, whom some of them were even proposing 50,000 minimum wage, some even insisting on staying on that 35,000 minimum wage. It is commendable that President Tinubu has led the charge in making commitment to Nigerian workers that the government will be paying a minimum wage of 70,000. But it is expected that every other stakeholder involved in this process will also take a cue from this and also ensure that the least paid Nigerian worker gets a minimum wage of at least 70,000 naira moving forward.
All right. I mean, if we go back, of course, to that particular, when the negotiation was done and the agreement reached, I mean, the labor union in attendance there was some sort of joy, you know, singing the solidarity song. And I mean, if I got it correctly, even giving it some sort of shout, like three busa in Street Palace. But my question is this. I remember having this conversation, you know, this same conversation just about a few weeks back. And there was this talk on not just the minimum wage, but living wage. I want that graphics to come up. My next question is this. Let's do a bit of breakdown, you know, as regards this recent development. The new minimum wage represents about a 133% increase from the current or the previous 30,000 minimum wage as approved in 2019. Now, at 70,000 naira per month, a Nigerian worker would earn roughly, there you have it on your screen, per week. If we had to break it down, 17,500 per day, 3,500, and per hour, which of course we know is obtainable, you know, in other climes, 438 naira. My question to you, Mr. Upah, is this: is this truly a living wage for an average worker?
Certainly no, it cannot be a living wage. It's not.
So why did we settle for this?
Well, my co-guest has just explained to you elaborately the obstacles that we met on the way. And if you're a good negotiator, you know when to cut your deal and walk away to come back the next day to fight. So we also took notice of the fact that what they took to Mr. President was 62,000. He on his own now, having looked at the realities around him, added 8,000. So we cut the deal and moved on. And also take note, every negotiation must have an end. If it does not have an end, it ceases to be a negotiation. So for us, even as this is not the best that we actually hoped for, we have decided to take it. We're waiting for another day.
All right, Mr. Femi Lawson, your reaction? Mr. Lawson, are you there? Okay, I think we are having a bit of connectivity issues there with Femi Lawson. Let me stay with you, Mr. Upah. Now, there's also the issue of cost of living. For some experts, they have argued that the conversation shouldn't necessarily have been just around the amount of money in your pocket or in the pocket of an average Nigerian, but the value of that money, the ability for that money to be able to sustain you, or the purchasing power of that money. So my question is pretty much simple. Is Labour also looking into addressing the cost of living crisis, particularly when it comes to basic amenities too?
Absolutely. If you take a look at the MOUs we signed with the government, the first one on the 5th of June 2023, the second one on the 2nd of October 2023. Issues of infrastructure, transportation, health, and education were all captured outside cash, because we're acutely aware of the fact that plenty cash without value is nothing. And we made that point clear to the government. So we are conscious of the fact that our infrastructure, we need to work. Value has to be created around our currency. so that it will make meaning to have the currency in our pockets. We're aware of this. Thank you.
All right. Femi Lawson, are you there?
Yes.
Okay. I would like your reaction to the breakdown and also, if at all, some of the things Mr. Upah said.
Well, for me, I think we must continue to demand for an improvement. And I think while this is accepted for now as the minimum wage, I think Labour must go further in approaching the necessary institution, particularly the National Assembly, in order to ensure that the promises of review are not just limited to, a verbal commitment by Mr. President. The reality is that if you look at the economic challenges, the rate of inflation, only in the last 1 year, you come to realize that there must be a consistent periodic review of this minimum wage in Nigeria. It used to be 5 years. Now, Mr. President is talking about 3 years. If it is possible, conditions such as, prevailing economic realities now have to be attached to what would determine the minimum wage in Nigeria. We cannot continue to talk about a minimum wage, review for 3 years, where exchange rates in months alone could go as high as 300, 400%. So we must look at how the Labour must look at how it will engage government further. Why not necessarily waiting for the next 5 years or 4 years, to the extent that it can use the prevailing economic realities in the country as a basis for renegotiating agreements. The truth is that in the private sector, in some other societies, you don't necessarily wait until 3-5 years before you negotiate a living wage for your workers. The system must be able to understand that workers have needs, Nigerians have needs, and whatever they earn must be able to meet these needs. And if this is not the situation, we cannot just celebrate or jubilate that now we have 70,000 naira minimum wage, while in the next couple of months this 70,000 may be as ridiculous as having 20,000 naira in your pocket as a minimum wage. So Labour must be able to continuously engage beyond review of this minimum wage. Labour must also pressurize government continuously to ensure that basic infrastructures and amenities are provided. A lot of Nigerian workers today have to push their wards, to private school, have to take their children through private hospitals. Government must ensure that there are basic, amenities that will ease the burden that a lot of Nigerians, Nigerian workers bear with the amount they earn as wages in Nigeria. That is one of the only way that this can be appreciable as a minimum wage for now.
All right, but I would also like you to talk about this, in tandem with the current cost of living in the country. Many have argued that why focus more on, cash at hand than the value of what, that money could buy. I remember there was a time, in this country when you could actually board airfare at 5,000 naira, right? But right now to travel even to the closest place, you're talking of thousands of naira, if not, if at all, certain destinations outside the country runs into millions. So what do you say as regards the cost of living crisis, with this current development?
It's a major issue, and I think that is one of the reasons why Labour insisted on 600,000 to 250,000, and the back and forth that we have witnessed over the weeks. The cost of living has so much skyrocketed to the extent that the average Nigerian worker cannot even, survive a month, even with a minimum wage as high as 200,000. Where, a lot of our workers rely on public transportation. Look at how the fares of local transport in the country has skyrocketed. Look at the prices of food, to the extent that at some point, even with your money in your hand, there are certain food items that are becoming unavailable for the average Nigerian to purchase. So this is not enough in any way. And it is not in any way going to be enough to have, to address the issue of, the cost of living of the average Nigerian. But I just think it's just a bit different. It's just a step forward from where we are, but it's not actually the end or the destination that we aim to achieve as Nigerian workers or as Nigerian people, as the case may be.
All right. Let me come back to you, Mr. Upah. Let's talk about the implementation of this directive or this agreement by the president, particularly across states. We know that some states are insisting that they want to pay a certain amount. Some have even questioned the sustainability of this. I'd also like to look at this in tandem with private business owners complying with all of this. What is Labour going to do in this regard?
First, let me begin by commending my co-guest, Mr. Lawson, for articulating the issues beautifully. He's done marvelously well. Coming to your question, the minimum wage law is a national law, and it affects all the constituencies, the states, local governments, the organized private sector. So anyone that does not obey the law will be acting in breach of the law, and there are consequences for this. But in any case, there is no reason, no justification for not wanting to pay. The revenue for the states has more than doubled. The states were sharing with the government 700 billion before, but they are now hitting 1.3 trillion. As for the organized private sector, certainly they have enough to pay, but it is also important for government to take certain decisions that will make the operating environment less toxic for them. But at the moment, they have the capacity to pay. In fact, it will interest you to know that before this new rate was announced, no one in the private sector, organized private sector, was earning less than, say, 68,000, 70,000. No one was earning less than that. So for them, this is routine, of course. So they'll be able to pay.
Okay, my next question will be pretty much direct. I mean, since the announcement of this new figure, and particularly with some of the footage that made it to mainstream and even social media, showing Labour leaders hailing the president, after this decision was reached, many of the opinion that maybe the Labour Union has been compromised. I'd like you to react to that.
I want to answer you directly too, that the Labour leaders have not been compromised. The singing of the solidarity song, which you witnessed, is a common practice with Labour leaders, whether in jubilation or in mourning. Do you understand?
Okay.
As for the bossas, there are 3 bossas that were given to the president. Don't you think a president, no matter how you feel about him, no matter how you feel about what Nigerians are going through, but a president who say, okay, in spite of all pressures I've been put under by the governors, by a section of the governors, by a section of the organized private sector, I will add something. And if you listen to him, he said, don't forget, I come from your constituency. Yeah, when Mr. President made that statement, it was in light of his background of popular struggle. Okay? So with all of that, it will be uncharitable not to say at least thank you. Labour leaders are not compromised. I must tell you this. They were just being natural. Okay? That's all.
So you said the Labour leaders were just being natural and not compromised?
Yes.
Okay.
No, you are not compromised.
Okay, I'd like to go to Femi Lawson on this one.
Well, for me, we must first and foremost appreciate the fact that if you look at what used to be the relationship between the Labour leadership in Nigeria and government, particularly during the last administration of President Buhari, I think it is not too much for the Labour leaders to have appreciated President Tinubu the way they did. You know, judging from his background as a pro-democracy person, I think it is not strange. We were here during the era of former President General Muhammad Buhari, and how he has had to avoid, you know, this kind of engagement. A lot of time, Buhari sets up committee to engage the labor union. Sometimes he reduced the labor union to, you know, groups that should be met by minister or some appointed committee member. Even while academic union were on strike for over 9 months in this country, the president did not find it necessary to sit and physically engage with them. I mean, former President Muhammadu Buhari. So I think President Tinubu should be commended for the way he's physically engaging with not just labor union in this case, even other stakeholders, wherever there are issues of disagreement. This is not the first time he's meeting with the labor leadership. He has shown commitment by spearheading, you know, the process of this negotiation. Buhari would have asked one minister of labor to be doing this, or one committee or the other to be doing this. So I think it's not too out of place that the labor leadership expressed the solidarity, just like Omrik said. That is natural. It is the way that labor unions express their solidarity, even in protest. It is the same way that labor union expresses themselves. So it is not out of place. And I think I want to personally commend the fact that President Tinubu has physically made himself available throughout the course of this negotiation for the new minimum wage.
Okay, now let's project a bit into, of course, what we've noticed in the past, you know, when decisions like this are made. We see situations where even basic amenities items, the prices go up because, for instance, for the market woman on the street, she feels that workers now earn more, and for that reason, they should pay more for goods. My question to you, Mr. Upah, is this. Do you think that at this point, some sort of price control, you know, or regulation should come into force, particularly for basic amenities, to ensure that, you know, individuals who deal, you know, in this sector don't use that, you know, opportunity to jack up price? That again would, you know, lead us back to the negotiation table for, you know, a review of wages anytime soon.
I was a young man in the era of price control. In fact, there was a board. Yeah, there was a body known as price control, and frequently, I mean, they raided shops and all of that in their drive to enforce price control. I think we have since moved to a full-fledged market economy, competition. Okay? So there will be no need to have a price control mechanism in place. What we need to do is to stimulate more production, give more incentives to the private sector, including small businesses, and on the other hand, empower workers through enhanced pay. This way you create a synergy. There'll be capacity, there'll be demand. Okay. And the demand will lead to competitive production of goods and services.
Okay.
People will now have a choice. For instance, let us look at the dairy subsector, where you have choices to pick from. So it's going to, all this will cut across the other subsectors and sectors.
Okay, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt, but let me give some maybe very practical instances. Recently, we saw the Oni of Ife intervene in Osun State as regards the price of food, which is very basic. Even in my hometown, Dogon, there was actually a move in that direction because they realized that many of these individuals were taking advantage of the popular narrative of the naira to the dollar. I mean, what does a Gari dealer, for instance, have to do with the exchange rate, right? In terms of, pegging the prices of goods. So hence this conversation as regards some sort of, price regulation, particularly when it comes to basic items. So I don't know because we know how some Nigerians can be when, announcements like this go out, irrespective of market forces.
Well, my response would be that I have utmost respect for the ONI, and I watched that program, his initiative, his interaction with the ladies and all of that. It was a noble thing that he did. It was a noble initiative. And you needed to have the heart of the ONI to do what he did. Having said this, price control in our shore or in our shores will not be effective. It will not be effective because there is no census of anything. There is no record of anything. If you now ask me to sell a mudu of Gari for, let's say, 500 naira, and I bought this mudu of Gari for 450 naira, I will not sell it to you. I will hide it. And you will not find it. So all I need to tell you is simply say, I don't have. And this will create other difficulties. So for you to be able to control something, you got to have access to its production source. We don't have that. Okay? So how do you control it? Those will simply withdraw what they have, and you have new difficulties. Rather than do that, you should encourage mass production, competitive production, competitive marketing. Give incentive to people. I produce, you produce. Yeah, Mr. Lawson produces, and we go to the market. Okay? So
all right.
I would want you to advert your mind to a point in the history of this country when the dairy companies were competing, raising the qualities of what they were doing. Let me also give you the example of noodles. Okay? There was a time they were competing through enhanced, through value added and through price reductions.
Okay.
All that happened before we found ourselves in this economic maelstrom.
All right, Mr. Upah, thank you so much for your take on it. But because we're pressed for time, let me go quickly to Femi Lawson to take his final thoughts on this. Femi, are you there?
Well, we must understand that most of what we see as maybe the exploitation of the Nigerian people by people who are into basic amenities, basic services, and goods are usually not the fault, but rather the reality in the market. You and I know that at some point in this country, some couple of weeks ago, even with your money in your hand, you could hardly find tomatoes or pepper to buy, even in Lagos. See, we are not producing enough, That is, to crash the prices of goods and services, there must be, enough. Production must increase. There must be enough even to compete within the market. But when the production is limited, when these produce are limited, there will always be the tendency for an increase in prices, not necessarily because there is a new minimum wage in town or not. When you get to the market where there can be 10, 20 people selling tomatoes and you could find only two people selling it, that's a natural cause for inflation, whether you like it or not. If you look at the rising cost of food items, you cannot disconnect it from the fact that the production of food has dwindled to the extent that our people they're not bringing this food produce again. The farm settlements are shutting down. Insecurity has chased our farmers away from the farm. So the few ones that have it, there's no competition, and the resources required to even get them to the market have skyrocketed. Also, when you talk about the issue of dollar affecting Gary, it may have to affect it, because the man who has to go to Bongo from Lagos to bring Gary, who has to pay maybe 1,000 naira per bag before, now have to pay 2,000 naira per bag, naturally have to increase the price of his Gary. So a lot of factors are responsible for this, not because our people are naturally willing to exploit, but a lot of conditions have made this inevitable. But yet, we must be able to control prices. Government must do a lot more in this. And I think the organized labor also have a duty to ensure that it is involved in the monitoring, of some of these, situations that affect the Nigerian people directly, especially when it has to do with working with government to ensure that prices are controlled to the extent that things can be made affordable and available for the average Nigerian.
All right, gentlemen, thank you so much for making our time to be on the program today. Benson Upah is actually the head of information, Nigerian Labour Congress. Of course, speaking to us from Abuja, and also Olufemi Lawson, a political analyst, speaking to us from Lagos. Gentlemen, once again, thank you for your time.
Pleasure.